Welcome to another episode of Guarantee News. My name is Garrett Sims. As usual, if you're watching for a second, a minute, the entire video, whatever it is, I appreciate it. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channels at GS Studios. And honestly, in the comments, say your opinion on whatever I think. If I say something you don't agree with, something I do agree with, I definitely want to hear in the comments about that. So today's video, we're going to be talking about something that we've been covering the last couple of episodes. If you look at this episode right here, ICE detains 2 men in downtown Indy. And then if you look at here, the story of Mohammed Khalil. Sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, but a former Columbia College student that is in Louisiana right now trying and facing deportation. You can watch that video on that. But this week, there's been a major update with Trump and his immigration policy, the people he's deciding to deport, how he's deporting them, the process he's going. And that happened, that came earlier this week when Trump deported 200 Venezuelan gang members from a gang called Tren de Agua. And I'm pronouncing it wrong. We'll call it TDA, but we'll get into that. But he's deporting them under a law, an old-ass law called the Alien Enemies Act, which basically says that the president can deport immigrants, migrants, people here illegally without having to go through the usual due process that happens with these strategies, or it happens with these cases. I guess I call it a strategy because this what Trump, we'll get to this, what Trump is doing is a strategy to try to flex his presidential powers. We'll get to that later in the video, but we're basically going to look at this in the conversation it started because Trump was like, okay, these are all gang members, and you think at first, okay, this is easy, we should be wanting gang members out. But then a judge said, wait, do not deport these people yet. 200 people. We have processes for this. We get they're in a gang, but we want to confirm they're in a gang. And Trump said, well, they're already in the air. They're already on their way there. So the cookie's already baked. We can't get them back in. And that started a shit show of Trump. Is he ignoring the Supreme Court? Is he ignoring, well, not the Supreme Court, but a federal judge? And a conversation of the executive branch versus the judicial branch and the powers they have, and the White House going against the Supreme Court, and this whole thing of how much power does Trump have? Is he ignoring the only people that can argue with him? That's a big conversation. And then again, that huge conversation of who is Trump deporting? How is he deciding how they're getting deported? And what is that whole process? Like, are we just taking people that we want or disagree with you and just deporting them, which is the Mohammed Khalil story that you should watch that video? Or are you just taking anyone based off of just certain tattoos they have or one thing where you think that they're going to be illegals and you're just deporting them without even asking? That kind of goes into that ICE detains an Indy conversation of it doesn't seem like the ICE members were at all asking any questions or asking for any identification, which makes these so choppy. And then you have this case that's going on, which makes it the scariest in the terms of Trump seeming to not care or listen to any powers that could potentially stop him, which is getting into something outside of the immigration, but also with the immigration tactic of asking the Republicans that like him, like, what was the point of this? Is to get rid of violent criminals or to get, like, what were you wanting? This is starting a big conversation, so we're going to get to that. I want to start by just focusing on the deportation of the Venezuelan immigrants and discuss the administration's deportation. So it's 200 Venezuelan immigrants, and it started a conversation of, are these gang members or are these people who are falsely accused and falsely being held in a prison? And this is an El Salvador prison, so this is a different country than where these people are from. Keep that in mind as well. They're not being deported back to their countries. They're being held in a prison because they're gang members according to the Trump administration. Now, the El Salvadorian president or leader released a video of these 200 Venezuelan immigrants and alleged gang members being deported. So we're going to watch a little
Federal
bit of this.
court ordered the Trump administration
and let me fix this to come to the all right.
Deported more than
this.
In open defiance of a federal court order, the Trump administration deported more than 200 Venezuelan migrants from the U.S. to El Salvador. President Donald Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a seldom used wartime provision, saying the Venezuelans were members of a crime syndicate linked to the government in Caracas.
That's important to keep in mind. The Alien Enemies Act of 19, what was it? Let's just go back 5 seconds.
Act of 1798.
Even worse, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. It's important to keep that's a wartime clause, because it's basically to make things go faster to basically deport people that are dangerous to the country. But it's during wars, or when you have like basically, it's a big deal to say we're at war with a Venezuelan gang in this case, but in other cases, we're at war with a group of people and we need to get them out. There's no need, or there's no time to be trying to decide if they're good people or not. And we got to look in and keep this in mind, because it's important later in the video.
A seldom used wartime provision, saying the Venezuelans were members of a crime syndicate linked to the government in Caracas. They were flown to El Salvador and placed in a notorious high-security prison. The flights violated a ruling by a federal judge barring the deportations, but administration lawyers argued that the judge's ruling didn't apply to the action. Venezuelan community leaders say they believe many of the individuals were not gang members.
The Venezuelan community as a whole is terrified right now, and there is a huge...
And that's getting in this video is not good to see. I mean, not good to see. I'll say that. But okay, and that's getting into this conversation of the legal stance, or the legal challenges that have become a big deal, because a federal judge basically said, you cannot deport these people yet. We have to make sure that these are gang members. And Trump said they're already in the air. So we've talked about that. That's where one of the biggest arguments of this has started. And Caroline, we're going to get to a video from the press secretary talking about it. Trump's been talking about it all week. Here's a Truth Social post that's saying, if a president doesn't have the right to throw murderers and other criminals out of our country because a radical left lunatic judge wants to assume the role of president, then our country is in very big trouble and destined to fail. And that's basically the conversation that they're having on the right, is that these are gang members. But, and we'll get to this on the left, of the conversation that's being had is, you're not even, first you're ignoring a federal judge, and now because the judge disagrees with Trump, they're saying Trump is calling for the judge to be impeached. And they're saying you're not even going through the right checks and balances to make sure that these people are who you're saying that they are. I think everybody thinks that if they're gang members and you're bringing in this act from 1974 that is saying we're at war with them, then okay, let's get them out of here, but we have to go to the checks and balances. And Trump is just ignoring them. It looks like he's not even talking to these federal judges. And then the Supreme Court, we'll get to that more. But first, let me, just to get an idea of what the Trump administration is saying in their power, in Trump's power as president, let's go to an interview with the White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt. I said we're going to be talking about her a lot, and we will. This is her on the right. Let me go back a little bit to just go over this question that this reporter asked her. Let's see. Okay.
Maduro regime in Venezuela, and the president, immediately upon taking office, designated TDA as a foreign terrorist organization. And under this act, it is within the president's authority to deport these terrorists. And anybody trying to defend these terrorists who have now been sent off of American soil should talk to the families of the individuals who these heinous monsters have killed and have raped. If you talk to those families, they are so heartened by the president's decision to take tough action and to use his executive authority, something that no other president has been willing to do, because President Trump does what he says he's going to do, and he is deporting these foreign terrorists from American soil to secure our homeland, and he's within his rights to do that. Jennifer. There's a
Hold on,
president use family into terror DA and absolutely the act as mentioned for legal footing. War. Will the president hadn't been prosecuted for designated as a terrorist organization, these individuals hadn't been prosecuted for terrorism. So my question is,
okay, yeah, there we go.
Time says that he cites the Enemies Act, but he's not sure that the law is completely on his side. He cites some previous Supreme Court shit. Lawyers to fight this in court, because we know we will win, even if we.
All right, that was I got the end of her answer, but we want to watch the question as well. So watch this. Hold on for a second. And the reason I'm doing this is because I think it shows she's a press secretary, so she's going to be one of the closest voices to show how the White House feels about the situation and Trump, and how they feel about, hey, did you ignore this judge saying not to put these people, not to deport these people? We gotta see. And B, does Trump even have the power to do this? And C, why is he putting in this act, this 1788 National Enemies Act against this Venezuelan gang that he's like, why is he putting this in? And if this gang is so bad, why are you not letting any of the usual checks and balances happen because people want to agree with you if they're from a gang? I think this is kind of the point she's making. I think it's important to hear her ask it and hear how she answers it. So let's watch this.
We have to go all the way to the Supreme Court.
One more on TDA. Andy McCarthy said in an interview with Hugh Hewitt, he certainly agrees with what the president is trying to do with the Alien Enemies Act, but he's not sure that the law is completely on his side. He cites some previous Supreme Court rulings dealing with enemy combatants in wartime, says that even they have a challenge or a right to challenge their detention in court. He raised concern also that while TDA has been designated as a terrorist organization, these individuals hadn't been prosecuted for terrorism. So my question is, will the president ask Congress potentially to declare war on these cartels for the invasion that he's talked about so that he's on stronger legal footing?
Well, we absolutely disagree with the legal opinion of the individual that you mentioned. We would not have moved forward with this if we didn't believe the president. This was within the president's executive authority to continue with this mass deportation effort under the authority provided to him under the Alien Enemies Act. And when you read the act, as I did last time at the podium, a predatory incursion is absolutely what has happened with Tren de Aragua. They have been sent here by the hostile Maduro regime in Venezuela, and the president, immediately upon taking office, designated TDA as a foreign terrorist organization. And under this act, it is within the president's authority to deport these terrorists. And anybody trying to defend these terrorists who have now been sent off of American soil should talk to the families of the individuals who these heinous monsters have killed and have raped. If you talk to those families, they are so...
Okay, yeah, and the question, I think, isn't really about whether TDA is a terrorist organization or how terrible they are. I think it's the conversation is over why are you guys so against the going through the checks and balances of making sure these guys are who you say you are? And the reason that this is being done, well, first, before I get to that, and I think the reason they're doing this, a lot of people saying, is because this is it's a strategy. It's a strategy to use immigration. One of them is it's a strategy to use immigration for Trump to basically say F you to the judicial branch and to the other branches, the other two branches of government, and do whatever he wants. And he's using this kind of like a chessboard piece, immigration, as a way to flex more and more power and push more and more against the people that could be against him. This is the Axios article by Mike Allen. We're just going to go through a little bit of this. So President Trump has accelerated a multi-pronged, methodically planned strategy to push the Supreme Court to bless his power to deport vastly more people with vastly fewer judicial restraints, checks and balances, the word we've been using. Trump officials see at least 5 questions detailed below. We're not going to get to those. Why it matters. Trump's plan revolves around 2 cases in obscure laws that have ignited lawsuits and sent shockwaves through the immigration system over successive weekends. So this is the first one, using the Immigration Nationality Act of 1952 to detain pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, who we've talked about, who helped lead protests at Columbia University. The administration says the courts have little say over Secretary of State Marco Rubio's determination that Khalil should be deported as a national security risk for protesting against the U.S. foreign policy. This is basically a conversation. Remember, we were saying if he was actually putting out pro-Hamas propaganda at the Columbia at the Columbia campus, then yeah, get him out of here. But if he was going for pro-Palestinian and he was for Palestinian rights, this should not be happening to him. And that the administration is not giving any proof that he's pro-Hamas, so it looks like he's just pro-Palestine, which makes this crazy. But you haven't heard a lot about this lately. It's kind of gone through to the wayside. Then this story with the invoking the Alien Enemies Act has blown up to deport accused Venezuelan gang members without immigration hearings. Nearly 140 were flown out of the U.S. on Saturday in a controversial operation that left a federal district judge fuming that his order to turn the plan around had been ignored. And then when you look at the Democratic side of this, the reason people are so mad is because not only did you defy the judge, not only are you making it scary to decide if you are going to listen to anyone that goes against you, but you're deporting like far liberal. You're deporting people that are good people, and you're discriminating against them, and you're putting them back to terrible countries without looking at all who these people are and confirming the things you're saying. And this is what was happening with Mohammed Khalil, is the point I'm making. But now with these 200 Venezuelan immigrants, it's happening at such a large manner, and they were deported with a judge saying not to deport them. So it just takes a step further, whereas the Trump is saying we are putting them in jail, we're taking them, which is what they've done with multiple people. But then now we're actually deporting them when a judge is telling us not to. And this is the Guardian article that I want to read a little bit that gets into that feeling of you're not checking who these people are before you're deporting them, and these could be good people. Trump waging sickening psychological war, deported Venezuelan lawyer says. So the lawyer of these Venezuelans, and who wrote this? Tom Phillips, Latin America correspondent, so shout out to him. So let's see, can you guys see this? Yeah. So a lawyer for one of the Venezuelan immigrants sent from the U.S. to a notorious mega prison in El Salvador has accused the Trump administration of waging a sickening campaign of psychological warfare against asylum seekers and migrants. In my 15 years of representing people in removal proceedings in the United States, this is the most shocking that I've ever seen happen to one of our clients, said Lindsay T., a California-based lawyer of the Immigrants Defense Law Center. I'm Deaf Group. I'm sorry if that's not how it is. I'm just going to say IMM Deaf represents one of the more than 200 Venezuelan citizens who were flown to El Salvador on Saturday as part of Donald Trump's highly controversial immigration crackdown. Some of them subsequently appeared in a cinematic 3-minute propaganda video shared by the Central American country's authoritarian president, Nayib Bukele, having their head shaved or being manhandled by guards. That's that video that we were watching. This is the video that was released by him, and they're calling it a propaganda video. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who we saw the video of earlier, accused the deported detainees, who now face at least a year inside the Salvadorian jail, of being heinous monsters who are part of one of the most violent and ruthless terrorist gangs on planet Earth, the Venezuelan crime group Tren de Aragua. Leavitt claimed their extraction. Sorry, I'm reading terribly. I'll read right now. I'm sorry. Leavitt claimed the extraction and removal to El Salvador meant they would no longer be able to pose any threat to American people. But I'm just going to say T, rejected that portrayal of her client, calling claims that he was involved in the gang completely baseless. This is really where it gets important. In fact, she said he was an LGBTQ plus artist who has fled political persecution in an increasingly repressive Venezuela and crossed into the U.S. from the Mexican border city of Tijuana last year. There, he passed a credible fear interview used by asylum officers to determine whether asylum seekers have reasonable grounds to request protection in the U.S. So he went through an interview, and they let him into the country by asylum seekers. Colleagues who have spent time with the Venezuelan man in detention described him as a very sweet and normal guy with no criminal history. Tokolowski said he appeared to have been wrongly identified as a gang member by immigration enforcement officials as a result of some benign tattoos that are not gang related. We're just in an absolute shock that has happened. And basically, to get to the nitty gritty of this, I wanted to read it. Basically, this is saying that, hey, this is a guy that is an artist and has some benign tattoos, and these immigration officials probably just came and arrested him, saw the tattoos, thought they were gang tattoos. That happens all the time. These people aren't trained to know what they're really looking for, or they're not going through any processes. And it looks like with this is a reoccurring theme, is they're using these one or two little things to say they're a danger and then taking them, and in this case, deporting them to a different country, not even their home country. I get they don't want to go back to their home country, but it is also kind of outside of the norms that they're deporting them to a different country. But they're taking these things that are benign and they're then connecting them to a gang and deporting them, especially, which makes it worse, as I keep saying, when a judge is saying to halt, they're still doing it. And then you have this man, I don't think she names him, but then you have this man that is now getting wrapped up in this, who they're saying is not a gang member at all. And I think it's important to say, who is our... I have a video on I covered it on Guarantee News. Pete Hegseth. If you don't remember, I'm not going to talk about this for more than two minutes. Pete Hegseth one of the many things people were scared about him. He was on Fox News. People were talking about if he's homophobic, he's racist, women shouldn't be in the military, all of these different things. I think this might show some of them. I don't know. But there is a conversation about him and his tattoos, and if his tattoos showed him being potentially racist and a bad person, tattoos that racist bad people have. And everybody on the right and Republicans were saying like, oh, why are we using tattoos? It was a big thing of these are tattoos that don't mean what you think they mean, and you're using them to do this far left thing. And now you have Venezuelan immigrants that are here for good reasons being locked up, deported, their head shaven. Remember, let's go back to this video. Their head shaven due to tattoos. So not only is Trump ignoring this judge, but Trump is rounding these people up. And it's like a thing where it's like, if these guys are gang members, we want to get them out of here, but we want to go through the right processes. And the thing that's scary to me, it makes it scary to me, is that it's the thing of him going past the judges and him going against the Supreme Court. And that's going to be one of the last things we look at closely with this. I want to cover just a couple things more with this video that are interesting to me. So I'll let it play a little bit here. Because, and I'm going to play this other parts of the videos because it's this big balance on each side of, we need to get these violent immigrants out of here and people that should be deported, but we need to make sure we're getting the right ones. And there's some cases where Trump is getting the right ones. This one right here.
Another defiance of the courts, immigration agents deported a Lebanese doctor and kidney specialist with a valid U.S. residence visa after a federal judge ordered a stay on her deportation. The administration alleges she is a Hezbollah sympathizer.
And you haven't seen any stories about that. It kind of looks like she is a Hezbollah sympathizer. So then you have the stories like that where it's like, okay, we have a lady that's a Hezbollah sympathizer here, and that's dangerous. She's openly done it. Then they have proof, and you haven't seen anything on CNN. So yeah, maybe she should have been deported. But then you have the stories of Mohammed Khalil where they're not giving any proof that he was giving pro-Hamas propaganda. And then you have the story of these 200 Venezuelan immigrants who are going through this right now.
Her attorney is vowing to challenge the
didn't mean to do that. And then you have a lawyer. That's sticking up for one of them, saying, no, this guy actually wasn't in a gang. He has tattoos, and that's where he's taken. It goes on both sides, and I want to play a little bit more of this.
Saar said in an interview, quote, "I don't care what judges think."
We removed terrorists from this country, and I stand by what the president did. I support 100%.
Civil liberties attorneys say the country is on dangerous ground.
If the government has this power and the president has this power, any group of people could all of a sudden be designated enemy aliens. The government's position is the courts could not review that. They could be in a minute's notice on a plane and put in a Salvadoran prison.
This video of the Venezuelan prisoners was released by Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele. Venezuelan American leaders.
And the last thing I want to cover with this is just now, all of this, what started with this is now spanning the argument with Trump, with federal judges in the Supreme Court, the Republican Supreme Court that I think we all know, which makes this even scarier. So basically, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts rejected calls for impeaching federal judges shortly after President Donald Trump demanded the removal of a judge who ruled against his deportation plans. Big deal, right? You have a Republican Supreme Court and you have the judicial branch, just period, federal judges. It's usually known that people listen to federal judges, and when you don't want to listen to them, even the president, there's a process that you go against that. So this is immigration is a big thing, but it's also leading into if Trump is going to do this, what's going to stop him from every single time he wants something done and a federal judge doesn't agree with him just saying this judge is terrible. And I just want to read a couple paragraphs of this. In an extraordinary display of conflict between the executive and judiciary branches, Chief Justice, the biggest judge in the world, John Roberts, who is conservative leaning, rejected calls for impeaching judges Tuesday, shortly after President Donald Trump demanded the removal of one who ruled against his deportation plans. The rebuke from the Supreme Court's leader demonstrated how the controversy over recent deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members has inflamed tensions over the judiciary's role, with a legal case challenging Trump's action now threatening to spiral into a clash of constitutional powers. For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision, Roberts said. Their normal appellate review process exists for that person. The rare statement came just hours after a social media post from Trump, who described U.S. District Judge James E. Boasberg as an unelected troublemaker and agitator. Boasberg had issued an order blocking deportation flights that Trump is carrying out by invoking wartime authorities from an 18th century law. All that stuff we've talked about. So this is a big deal, not only for the thing of, okay, he's deporting people that shouldn't be deported. That is also a big deal, but it's also a big deal if this is the judiciary branch. This is the third branch of government. This is one of the biggest, most important things in the way our country is ran. And I think that should be the thing that scares a lot of people. And I'm just looking to see what happens with this in the next couple of days. The judge gave Trump an extra day to give information on, and the extra day being tomorrow, Friday, to give extra information on, hey, were these flights already in the air and did you ignore me? Or did you ignore me? Like, were the flights already in the air and you couldn't get them back? It doesn't seem like that. Did you ignore me? What time did these flights take off? What time did these flights land? The judge has given Trump's team, his administration, an extra day to give that information. It's interesting to see how this continues. It's interesting to see what happens with this judge. And it's interesting. I want to know in the comments from like the people who are on the right, what do you think of Trump's way of deporting these people? And do you think these people are potentially that are not members of a gang and people who are not pro-Hamas and pro-Hezbollah and do you think there's a potential that there are good people getting mixed up with this? Or do you think this is a part of how this problem has to be fixed? Where are you leaning on this? And I also want to think, what do you think about the overall Trump going against the judiciary branch, going against Republicans, going against the way the country is ran and checks and balances to do whatever he wants? Do you think that's helping the country? Do you think that's good? I'm honestly interested because I don't think it's good. I think it's quite scary. That's the thing with this I'm the most worried about, is him going against the Supreme Court and going against judges' rulings and doing what he's saying and then finding laws afterwards to do what he wants. But that is that. I will say thank you for watching again. That was not supposed to be that long. In the comments, same with always. Let's go. Well, actually, no. We're gonna get better at Guaranteed News. I think this was 26 minutes, so this is good. I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna work on bringing these videos down because I don't want them to be going towards 30 minutes. But if you watch this video again, however long, I appreciate you for watching. You have a good rest of your day, night, whatever time you're watching this. And that is a wrap on that.